The huge fighting arena on Valdorian Prime was massive, bigger than 20 football fields put together. Its walls glowed with bright colors that changed based on how excited the crowd got. Captain Alex Hayes stood in the waiting room, looking through the clear walls at 60,000 aliens from all over the galaxy filling the seats. This big tournament happened every year. Warriors from hundreds of different planets came to fight and show who was the strongest. It helped decide which alien races were the best fighters in the galaxy. Alex felt nervous as he watched Vexor, a strange alien with 4 arms who kept spinning his sword-like weapons in fancy patterns. "This isn't like those boring meetings your Earth people have," Vexor said with a musical laugh that sounded like wind chimes. Alex checked his gear and made sure his combat knife was in the right place. It was the only weapon he brought. "Different kind of talking," he said calmly. "Same basic ideas. Watch what's happening, understand who you're fighting, find things you both agree on." "The only thing fighters usually agree on," Vexor laughed, "is where to bury the loser." A beautiful voice filled the entire arena through special sound systems. Princess Liravel stood on a fancy platform high above the fighting area. She wore shiny armor that caught all the colorful lights. Her silver hair glowed, and her pointed ears and bright eyes showed she was royal Valdorian nobility. "Warriors from across the galaxy," Princess Liravel announced, her voice pretty but strong, "welcome to the 312th Tournament of Champions. Here, being strong meets being smart. Old ways meet new ideas. The best fighters from everywhere come to test their skills." Alex looked around at the other fighters near him. There were Croton berserkers with natural armor like tanks. Andromedan fighters who could move things with their minds. Valdorian knights with technology so advanced it looked like magic. Each alien race had special powers that took thousands of years to develop. "The rules are easy," Princess Liravel continued, sounding a little amused. "One-on-one fights. You win by making your opponent give up or knocking them out. Don't hurt anyone permanently. Bring honor to your people, show your skills, and respect the old traditions that keep us all civilized." The crowd whispered excitedly as the fighters started walking into the arena for the opening ceremony. Alex found himself near the back of the line. His normal human appearance made the watching aliens curious. They were used to seeing more impressive-looking fighters. "Look at that one," someone in the crowd said. "The human barely comes up to the Croton's belt." "Which human?" another voice asked. "The small one with just one knife." "How cute." Alex kept his face calm, even though he had to admit the comments were true. At 6 feet tall and 180 pounds, he was much smaller than most of his competition. He had no natural armor, couldn't move things with his mind, and didn't have any fancy technology. Just standard military gear and the kind of training that had kept him alive through 3 dangerous missions for Earth's government. "Fighters, present yourselves to the royal platform," announced the tournament judge, a huge Valdorian whose armor showed he had won many battles. The line moved forward. Each warrior stopped in front of Princess Liravel and saluted in the way their people did. When Alex's turn came, he gave a precise military bow that showed respect without looking weak, a diplomatic move that made the princess look at him with interest. "Captain Alex Hayes," she read from her screen, her voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "From Earth's Federation. Former Special Operations soldier, now a diplomatic worker." She paused, studying him with those bright eyes. "Tell me, Captain, what brings a diplomat to a fighting tournament?" "Cultural exchange, Your Highness," Alex replied, his voice steady even with 60,000 aliens watching. "Sometimes the best way to understand people is to join in their traditions." "Indeed," the princess said, and Alex heard approval in her voice. And what do you hope to do in this competition? To represent my people with honor and learn from warriors whose skills have been proven across the galaxy. Princess Liravel nodded gracefully, but Alex noticed a small smile on her face. A good goal, Captain. Though I must say, seeing you among these legendary warriors reminds me of an old Valdorian saying about courage and wisdom. I would be honored to hear it, Your Highness. The princess's smile grew bigger, and her voice took on the tone of someone telling a funny joke to friends. We say that true courage is knowing when you can't win, and true wisdom is knowing when to quit gracefully. Her laugh was musical and genuinely amused. Though I suppose, she added dramatically, if by some miracle you were to win this tournament, I would be so impressed by such an impossible thing that I would gladly become your wife. The arena exploded with laughter. 60,000 beings enjoyed the princess's joke at the humans' expense. Even the other fighters smiled at what was clearly meant as harmless fun. Alex felt his face get a little warm, but kept his diplomatic calm. Your Highness is very kind, he said with another precise bow. I will try to be worthy of such extraordinary generosity. As he moved to his assigned spot, Alex caught the princess's expression changing from amusement to something that might have been surprise. Maybe she expected anger, embarrassment, or defensive arguing. Instead, his calm acceptance of her joke seemed to puzzle her. The formal presentations ended, and fighters began leaving to prepare for the first rounds. Alex found himself wondering if Princess Liravel realized that her casual comment, witnessed by representatives from dozens of species, had just become part of the official tournament record, a binding statement that would follow them both regardless of how the competition turned out. The first rounds began at sunrise with fights scheduled throughout the day to handle the tournament's huge number of competitors. Alex spent the morning watching other fights, studying techniques and technologies he had only read about in intelligence reports. The Andromedan fighters moved objects with thought alone, while the Zenator warriors controlled gravity fields around their bodies like personal force shields. Fascinating, isn't it? Princess Liravel's voice carried across the arena as she explained particularly impressive displays for the crowd. Watch how the Croton Berserker's natural armor changes to handle different weapon attacks. Those plates aren't just protection, they're sensor networks that study attack patterns and adjust defensive settings in real time. Alex took mental notes as a Valdorian champion showed combat techniques that seemed to defy physics. The warrior moved with flowing grace, his energy blade cutting through solid matter while defensive fields deflected incoming attacks with precision that suggested advanced computer assistance. The Valdorian fighting style, the princess explained to the crowd, focuses on harmony between warrior, weapon, and fighting environment. Technology serves skill, not the other way around. When Alex's name was called for his first match, a wave of excited anticipation rippled through the stands. His opponent was announced as Grotto of the Croton Hegemony, a berserker whose reputation for brutal efficiency had earned him victories on a dozen worlds. This should be fun, Alex heard someone comment as he walked toward the fighting circle. How long do you think the human will last? 30 seconds if he's lucky, came the reply. Grotto once killed an armored war beast with just his claws. The Croton warrior entered from the opposite side, and Alex felt the crowd's collective gasp. Grotto stood nearly 10 feet tall, his natural armor plates gleaming with metallic highlights that suggested recent battles. Sharp claws extended from his hands, each one capable of slicing through most known materials. His 4 eyes tracked Alex's movement with hunting intensity. Fighters, prepare for combat, announced the judge. Victory by giving up or being knocked out. Begin when you hear the tone. Alex drew his combat knife, its simple steel construction looking almost primitive compared to the energy weapons and technological marvels he'd observed throughout the day. The Croton's claws extended fully, creating weapons that were longer than Alex's entire blade. The tone sounded like a deep bell, vibrating through the arena's crystal structure. Grotta charged immediately, covering the distance between them with frightening speed despite his massive size. Alex sidestepped at the last possible moment, letting the Berserker's momentum carry him past while scoring a shallow cut across his opponent's side. The crowd gasped as the Croton's natural armor plate sparked but held the knife, doing minimal damage. Grotta spun with surprising agility, his claws whistling through the air where Alex had been standing. "The human is faster than expected," Princess Liravel observed, her voice carrying a note of professional interest. "But speed alone won't overcome that armor difference." Alex stayed mobile, using the combat circle's full area while Grotta pressed his attack. The Croton's strength was overwhelming, but Alex had faced similar disadvantages before. Size and power meant nothing if you couldn't connect with your target. "Come here, little human," Grotta growled in heavily accented standard language. "Stop running and face me properly." "I am facing you," Alex replied calmly, ducking another swipe that would have taken his head off. "Just not in the way you expected." The fight continued for several minutes, Alex avoiding the worst of Grotta's attacks while landing minor cuts that gradually built up damage. He studied the Berserker's movement patterns, noting how the armor plates overlapped and where flexibility required thinner protection. When Grotta overextended during a particularly aggressive assault, Alex saw his opening. Instead of retreating, he moved inside the Berserker's reach, his knife finding the joint between chest and shoulder plates where nerve clusters controlled the arm's motor functions. The Croton's right arm went suddenly limp, claws retracting as neural pathways shut down. Grotta roared in surprise and pain, but Alex was already moving, his blade finding the corresponding nerve cluster on the opposite side. Within seconds, both of the Berserker's arms hung uselessly at his sides. Grotta stood swaying on his feet, powerful but unable to attack or defend effectively. "Do you give up?" Alex asked quietly, holding his knife ready but not threatening. The arena fell completely silent as Grotta considered his options. Without his arms, continued fighting was impossible. "I give up," he said finally, his voice carrying clearly through the acoustic enhancement. The crowd erupted in shocked amazement. Alex helped steady the Croton as medical personnel rushed forward to treat the nerve damage, temporary, but requiring specialized care to restore full function. "Remarkable," Princess Liravel's voice carried over the crowd noise, and Alex thought he heard genuine surprise in her tone. "Captain Hayes has shown that superior anatomy can be overcome through superior tactics." The Croton Berserker's greatest strength became his weakness when faced with an opponent who understood the vulnerabilities that came with that power. As Alex left the combat circle, he caught sight of the princess watching him with a different expression than she'd worn during the opening ceremonies. The amusement was still there, but tempered now with something that looked like curiosity. The first rounds continued around him, but Alex noticed more competitors paying attention to his presence. Word was spreading through the preparation areas that the unassuming human had capabilities that weren't immediately obvious. "Impressive work," said Thane Cross, a Valdorian warrior whose own reputation was legendary. "Most beings try to match the Croton's strength with strength. You chose a more elegant solution." "Sometimes the indirect approach is more effective," Alex replied diplomatically. Thane Cross nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed. I look forward to seeing how you handle your next opponent." As the day's matches concluded and the field narrowed from hundreds to dozens, Alex realized that Princess Liravel's casual jest was beginning to seem less amusing and more prophetic to everyone present. By the tournament's third day, Alex had advanced through 6 rounds of competition, defeating opponents through methods that confused spectators and competitors alike. His victory over the Andromedan psychic had involved using the arena's reflective surfaces to create visual feedback loops that disrupted mental concentration. Against the gravity manipulator, he had employed acoustic resonance to interfere with the delicate harmonics required for field control. "The human fights like water," commented Master Velver, an elderly Valdorian combat instructor who had been providing analysis for the royal viewing platform. "He flows around obstacles rather than confronting them directly, finding the path of least resistance to achieve maximum effect." Princess Lyriel leaned forward in her throne, studying Alex as he prepared for his semi-final match. Her casual jest from the opening ceremony had become the subject of intense speculation throughout the arena, with many spectators beginning to wonder if the impossible might actually occur. "Your Highness," her aide whispered discreetly, "perhaps we should clarify the legal implications of your earlier statement. The tournament records show." "I know what they show," the princess replied quietly, her eyes never leaving the combat preparation area. "Under Valdorian honor law, witnessed oaths are binding regardless of the speaker's intent or the audience's perception of jest versus sincerity. But surely exceptional circumstances would make me appear weak and unreliable," Lyriel finished. "No. If Captain Hayes continues to advance, we will address the situation with appropriate dignity." Alex's semi-final opponent was announced as Zwaxera, a Volari warrior dancer whose species was renowned for combat techniques that resembled lethal choreography. The crowd settled into expectant silence as the competitors entered the arena, many spectators now genuinely curious about how the human would handle this new challenge. Zwaxera moved like liquid shadow, her form-fitting battlesuit enhancing natural agility that bordered on superhuman. Twin energy blades materialized in her hands, their edges crackling with power that could slice through most known materials. She began her combat dance immediately, blades weaving patterns that created defensive barriers while building momentum for devastating attacks. "The Volari fighting style," Princess Lyriel explained to the crowd, treats combat as artistic expression. Each movement serves multiple purposes: offense, defense, and aesthetic perfection combined into seamless whole. Alex circled cautiously, studying the rhythm and pattern of Zwaxera's movements. The dance was beautiful, hypnotic, and absolutely lethal. Direct engagement would be suicide against an opponent whose every motion was calculated for maximum efficiency. Instead, Alex began clapping. The simple, steady rhythm cut through the arena's ambient sound, creating an auditory backdrop that hadn't existed moments before. Zwaxera's dance faltered slightly as the unexpected sound interfered with her internal timing mechanisms. "Interesting tactic," the princess observed, though her voice carried a note of confusion. "I'm not certain I understand the strategic purpose." Alex continued clapping but began varying the rhythm, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, occasionally stopping entirely before resuming with a different pattern. Zwaxera's perfect choreography began showing minor imperfections as her body responded to the external rhythm cues. "He's disrupting her kinesthetic awareness," Master Velver said with sudden understanding. "The Volari fighting style relies on perfect internal rhythm. By introducing competing temporal patterns, he's forcing her nervous system to choose between internal and external timing references." As Zwaxera's movements became increasingly erratic, Alex stopped clapping abruptly and moved. His knife found a gap in her defense caused by mistimed footwork, touching the nerve cluster at her wrist just as he had with his previous opponents. Her energy blades flickered and died as motor control was temporarily severed. "I yield," Zwaxera said gracefully, recognizing that continued fighting was impossible without weapon control. The arena fell silent for a long moment before exploding into cheers and commentary. Alex helped steady his opponent as medical personnel arrived, offering the same courteous assistance he had shown all his defeated adversaries. "Captain Hayes advances to the final match," announced the tournament marshal. "He will face champion Thane Cross of Valdorian Prime in tomorrow's concluding ceremony." As Alex left the combat circle, he noticed Princess Lyriel watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The playful amusement from the opening ceremony had been replaced by something more complex, respect, perhaps, mixed with what might have been concern. "Captain," called a voice from behind him. Alex turned to find Thane Cross approaching, still wearing the ceremonial armor of a Valdorian champion. The warrior was impressive even by the standards Alex had observed, tall, graceful, and carrying himself with the confidence that came from never having experienced defeat. "Champion Thane Cross," Alex replied with a respectful nod. "I look forward to our match." "As do I," the Valdorian said, studying Alex with intelligent eyes. "You fight with wisdom rather than strength, strategy rather than power. It is refreshing to face an opponent who understands that victory is achieved through the mind first, the body second. You honor me with your praise. I also warn you," Thane Cross continued, his tone remaining friendly but carrying an undertone of seriousness. "Tomorrow's match carries implications beyond personal achievement. Princess Lyriel is beloved by our people, and her jest has become a matter of considerable attention. Should you actually win?" "I understand," Alex replied. "I have no intention of forcing anyone into unwanted obligations. Honor can be satisfied in many ways." Thane Cross nodded slowly. "Spoken like a true diplomat. Perhaps that is why you have come so far in a warriors' competition." As evening settled over the arena complex, Alex found himself looking toward the royal viewing platform where Princess Lyriel remained in conference with her advisors. Tomorrow would bring either the end of his unexpected tournament run or the beginning of complications he hadn't anticipated when he first entered the competition. Either way, he intended to face the final match with the same approach that had brought him this far: careful observation, tactical thinking, and respect for both his opponent and the traditions they represented. The final day of the tournament dawned with crystal clarity, as if the planet itself was preparing for the unprecedented climax about to unfold. Princess Lyriel stood on her private balcony overlooking the arena, watching the crowds gather with an energy that seemed almost electric. 60,000 beings from across the galaxy had come to witness what many were calling the most unlikely championship match in tournament history. "Your Highness," her chief advisor said quietly, "the legal scholars have finished their analysis. Under Valdorian honor law, your statement constitutes a binding oath. Should Captain Hayes emerge victorious, I will be bound to marry him," the princess finished. "Yes, I understand the implications. The question is whether Captain Hayes does." Below in the preparation chambers, Alex completed his final equipment check with the same methodical precision he'd shown throughout the tournament. His simple combat knife looked almost primitive compared to the advanced weaponry he'd observed, but it had served him well through 7 matches against superior opponents. "Nervous?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the Federation's cultural attaché, who had been serving as his unofficial advisor. "Focused," Alex replied honestly. Champion Thane Cross is everything the other opponents were, but with the tactical sophistication to learn from their mistakes. And there's the princess's situation." Alex paused in his preparations. "One challenge at a time. First, I need to survive the next hour." The arena filled to capacity as the formal ceremonies began. Princess Lyriel took her place on the royal platform, her ceremonial armor catching the morning light in patterns that seemed to shift with her movements. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the quantum-enhanced acoustics. "Citizens of the galaxy," she announced, "we gather today to witness the conclusion of our tournament, where Captain Alex Hayes of the Terran Federation will face Champion Thane Cross in combat for the ultimate honor." The crowd roared its approval, but Alex noticed tension in the princess's voice that hadn't been there during previous ceremonies. She was clearly aware of what hung in the balance beyond mere tournament victory. Thane Cross entered the arena first, his advanced armor systems creating an almost ethereal glow around his tall frame. Energy weapons materialized in his hands, not just blades, but complex constructs that could shift configuration based on tactical requirements. He moved with fluid grace that made even walking look like a form of art. Alex followed from the opposite entrance, drawing scattered cheers from spectators who had begun to appreciate his unconventional approach to combat. His simple gear looked almost quaint compared to his opponent's technological sophistication, but 7 victories had taught the crowd not to underestimate the unassuming human. "Competitors, prepare for combat," announced the tournament marshal. This final match will determine not only the tournament champion, but potentially reshape diplomatic relations between our peoples. The crowd fell silent as both warriors took their positions. Alex studied Thane Cross carefully, noting how the Valdorian's armor systems responded to his movements, how his weapon configurations shifted based on proximity and angle. This opponent wouldn't be defeated through simple tricks or single tactical insights. The tone sounded deep and resonant through the arena's crystal structure. Thane Cross attacked immediately, but with controlled precision rather than overwhelming force. His energy constructs shifted between blade, whip, and projectile configurations, creating attack patterns that were both beautiful and deadly. Alex found himself pressed harder than he had been in any previous match, forced to use every technique and insight he had gained throughout the tournament. "Magnificent," Princess Lariel breathed, her commentary carrying clearly through the acoustic enhancement. Both warriors are demonstrating why they reached this final confrontation. The battle raged across the combat circle, Alex using mobility and environmental awareness to avoid the worst of Cross's attacks while looking for openings that might not exist. The Valdorian champion had clearly studied all of Alex's previous matches, adapting his tactics to counter every technique the human had previously employed. Minutes passed without either combatant gaining decisive advantage. Alex's endurance training kept him moving despite the relentless pressure, while Thane Cross maintained perfect form despite his increasingly complex attack patterns. Then Alex noticed something subtle in the energy weapon's behavior, a brief flicker when transitioning between configurations, barely perceptible but potentially significant. The advanced technology required quantum processing cycles to reshape itself, creating microsecond vulnerabilities during transformation. On the next transition, Alex timed his move perfectly. Instead of avoiding the weapon change, he attacked during it, his knife finding the gap between Cross's armor plates just as the energy construct flickered between forms. The precise strike severed the neural connection between warrior and weapon, causing the energy fields to collapse harmlessly. Thane Cross stood weaponless, his expression showing surprise but not defeat. "Cleverly done," he said with genuine admiration. "But I am not helpless without technology." The unarmed combat that followed tested both warriors' limits. Thane Cross was stronger, faster, and more technically skilled, but Alex's unconventional training and willingness to accept damage while delivering precise counterattacks gradually wore down the champion's advantages. The end came suddenly when Cross executed a perfect throw that should have ended the match. Alex used the momentum to spin behind his opponent, his knife finding the nerve cluster that controlled the Valdorian's primary muscle groups. Thane Cross collapsed gracefully, his body temporarily paralyzed but his mind clear. "I yield," he said with dignity that honored both warriors. "The victory is yours, Captain Hayes." The arena erupted in chaos, cheers, gasps, and animated discussion in dozens of languages as the impossible became reality. Alex helped steady Thane Cross as medical personnel arrived, offering the same courteous assistance he had shown all his opponents. Princess Lariel descended from her platform, approaching the combat circle with measured steps that commanded absolute attention from the crowd. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the sudden silence. "Captain Hayes," she said formally, "you have achieved what none thought possible." By the laws of this tournament and the witnessed oath I swore, I am bound to honor my words. Alex bowed respectfully. Your Highness, you spoke in jest, and I would never hold you to obligations undertaken in humor. Your honor is satisfied by acknowledging my victory. Nothing more is required. The princess studied his face carefully, searching for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. You would release me from my oath, even though it was witnessed by representatives of dozens of species? I would offer you a choice, Alex replied. Honor can be satisfied in many ways. If you feel that marriage would fulfill your obligations, I would be honored to court you properly and see if genuine affection might grow between us. If you prefer other arrangements, I trust your wisdom to find appropriate alternatives. Liravel was quiet for a long moment, her luminous eyes studying this human who had just demonstrated both martial prowess and diplomatic grace. When she finally spoke, her voice carried clearly through the arena. Captain Hayes, you have won more than a tournament today. You have earned my respect, my admiration, and perhaps something deeper that I had not expected to find. She smiled then, genuine and warm. I accept your offer of proper courtship, not because honor demands it, but because I find myself curious about what such a partnership might become. The crowd exploded into celebration as the princess took Alex's hand, their union representing not just personal choice but the forging of stronger ties between their species. As they stood together in the arena's center, Alex reflected on how the most binding promises were often the ones we discovered we wanted to keep. 6 months later, their wedding ceremony became a celebration watched across the galaxy, proving that sometimes the greatest victories were achieved not through conquest, but through the courage to be worthy of unexpected opportunities.